Good morning, Tim Cranmore here again. You can see from a fairly chilly workshop. Now, I haven't talked to you for a while, but I felt I had to talk about my latest purchase off eBay. Here it is. Now, with apologies to Sarah Jeffrey, I'm going to do an opening the package video about this object here. But first, what I'd like to do is talk about 3D printing. Now, most of you have come across 3D printing and you think it's the best thing since sliced bread, and some people really believe in it very fervently and think that anything they make with 3D printing is going to be perfect. Well, of course, it's not. But I thought when I started making my dragon flutes, which you might have come across, that 3D printing might be the way to make a cheaper version. So I spent quite a lot of money paying a firm to scan one of my Descant dragon flutes, and then having persuaded them to, or paid them to scan it, I then paid them to produce a 3D printed version, which arrived, and I was absolutely horrified, and I contacted them and said, this is absolutely dreadful, you can't do this to me, there is no way that this is going to work. And very nicely, they actually did a much more sophisticated version, which I'll show you in a minute. Now, those of you who know something about 3D printing will know that there are two basic techniques. There's resin printing, which is done by curing the resin. No, there are three techniques. There's powder printing, in which the finished product is lifted from a vat of powder and it's cured by a laser within the powder. And there's resin printing, in which the finished product is pulled from a vat of liquid resin and it's cured with a laser as it comes out. And then there's, I'm not quite sure what the technical term for it is, but I would call it splodge printing, which is what most of the cheap printers you buy on eBay operate off, whereby the resin is deposited in lines or circles on a bed according to the computer program. And the design builds up that way. Now, the first one they did was obviously splodge printing, and it was absolutely dreadful. But this was the second one they sent me, and although they didn't tell me this, I would say has been done by resin printing, and it's actually not too bad. Now, my redoubtable nephew, who taught me an awful lot about these machines, I sent him the scan a few weeks ago, and he produced this, which is done by, once again, I don't know the term, I would call it splodge printing, and it's an awful lot better than the one that I got from the scanning company. But there are still places where I can't really show you, but they're rough. There's little bits of plastic hanging in bores and things. It doesn't really fit together. The surface is quite rough and would need refinishing. However, actually, I was rather surprised to find that if you put the block in, and I have a separate block here, this is a separate block, it actually works after a fashion like this. It's not very good, but it's there. And actually, this resin one works quite nicely, though I did have to do quite a bit of work on it to persuade the block to fit and the voicing to work. This works like this. That's actually not bad, is it? This is an original one made out of African blackwood, and I would like to think it works the best of the lot. I don't know how this is going to come over in the video, but I'll just play the same sort of little scale on it. Nice. Not actually enormously different from this, but I can imagine that by the time I'd actually fiddled with this and scraped it and it's been done, I think this is a very long-winded process, then maybe this is not going to be the cheap version that I hoped. I will say that I had the scan, I sent the scan off to some plastic manufacturers of plastic things, and they sent back a quote saying to have the recorder made by injection moulding, which of course is how the very, very top end ones are made, will cost me at least £40,000 for a set of moulds, and come out at a unit cost of between £11 and £12 a recorder, which is really far too expensive. However, I went on eBay a little while ago, and some of you have said, Oh yes, I saw that. Do you know that someone's selling a Dragon recorder on eBay? So I had a look and I thought, I'm going to buy one of those. It's still in the box. Let's have it out, shall we? It's always fun. I don't know who's making them. Out it comes. I still do not know what is in this bubble wrap. I know it's Christmas coming up. Here we go. Still unwrapping. There was a lot of excitement, especially at academic institutions, about 3D printing, and I saw some that were made by people who, because they hadn't the faintest idea how a recorder works, one, they couldn't do it themselves, and also two, they couldn't accept the fact that the offering they had made didn't work, and so there wasn't a lot of point in persevering with it. Bubble wrap can be quite resistant when it puts its mind to it. Awful lot of bubble wrap. So, first thing to note is that the 3D printed Dragon recorder does not come in a case. That's all right, I can cope with that. And here we are. I haven't seen this before. Ooh. Well, look at that. Now, actually, I'm quite surprised because the finish of this thing is actually quite good. It's nice and shiny. It looks as though it's been made by a splodge method. Interesting. And it certainly looks like a dragon. It has a very Chinese looking dragon at the end, with its mouth open to let the sound out. It's even in two halves. In fact, I do believe it's in 3/3. Good heavens, we have a centre, we have a foot, and we have a head. That's interesting because it means I can look down the bore. I can see there's a bit of a hair here that I'm just going to remove because that's not going to help. The bore is a bit mucky. But not as unpolished as I thought it would be. The finger holes are not too neat, but quite neat. I'm very impressed with this on the outside. I didn't know you could get such a nice finish with this sort of printing. Now the voicing, well, one of the problems with a recorder is that you really need a separate block. You can't do anything to the voicing unless you have a block that you can take out, and this is where this rather nice one that my nephew made for me actually scores, because I sent him a scan of the block. Here is a scan of the block, and it means that it can be fiddled with. Of course, ideally in a commercial world you want something that just comes off the production line and it just goes out and it's finished. If you watch Daniel Brugan's wonderful film, you'll find he visits the Yamaha factory, and all you can hear is the Yamaha factory is people playing. You just hear this. And he says, what's that? And he said, oh, they're testing the school recorders. They only play one note. Fair enough, only one note is needed. However, we have here this dragon flute, and I must admit, it looks actually quite cool. Yeah, very nice. So, I'm just going to look down the windway and have a little commune with what they put at the end of the windway. Excuse me a second. Interesting. I suspect this is not going to work, but I can't say that because you're all absolutely waiting with ears and eyes agog for when I first put this in my mouth and try and play some sounds with it, aren't you? Okay, let's go. I have to say it does have a tapered bore as well, also very impressive. Here we go. Absolutely appalling. This does not work, which is a shame because there's so much right with it, and yet there's also so much wrong with it. The voicing is all over the place. The labium is far too high. The block is far too low. The window, there's no chamfers. The window is really very, very large. You see this? I'm sure that people all over the place will be very interested to see this because people have said, ooh, I watched that. And I was the one that said, I'm going to buy one. So here we are. But I'm afraid, Mr. Dragon Flute, oh, and the astonishing thing is, you might think this is made in some sweatshop in Bangkok. Well, it's not actually. It came from Devon. I'm not quite sure if it's imported into Devon, but I'm afraid I will send this video to the people and they'll be utterly horrified, and maybe we'll have a dialogue of some sort, because with a few changes, it's an interesting thing. I'll just try playing again. Low C. Low D has no strength at all. The only note that really works is the C, which is actually 30 cents sharp anyway. So I'll just play a tune. Well, it won't be a tune, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to give it a fair whack. Here we go. I can't even tell if the octaves are correct. So, interesting thing, stick it on the sideboard. Do not encourage your children to buy one, because if they turn up with one of these at school, they will get very, very, very short shrift, and they will be very embarrassed, and they will have to go back to their mothers and say, terribly sorry, but it looks great, but it just doesn't work. I'll have a chat with the people who made it, because I'm really interested to find out where it came from, and I might be able to help. Meanwhile, just as a shameless plug, dragonflute.com now has an online shop where you can purchase these amazing things at not an enormous amount of money, but considerably more, I'm afraid, than this. That's a nice picture, isn't it? Bye-bye.